Welcome back to Chestnut Week at the Pennsylvania Farm Show. I'm Jim Searing, president of the Pennsylvania and New Jersey chapter of the American Chestnut Foundation. And I'm going to be your host for this series, which is designed to inform and update you on the quest to save the American chestnut and restore it to our homes, our farms, our fields, and our forests. We're featuring an array of experts on growing, restoring, and finding chestnuts across our region. And we're really glad you joined us today. We're here, and you can see my background here is really the virtual PA Farm Show, one that you don't have to travel to this year. The screen is the display we normally bring to the farm show every year, and we normally see thousands of people. We look forward to next year when hopefully we can see you all in person and online like we're doing now. Before we start our program, there's a few things you need to know. First, this program is being recorded. And that includes anything you put into questions and answers or the chat. And secondly, we will mute everyone except for the presenters. And we have set this Zoom up so that no one can see your screen. Our focus will be on the presenters. And lastly, we will not be surprising anyone by calling on individuals. We will have time for questions after Hoy's presentation. So if you have one, please enter it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. There's also a chat section. We won't be monitoring it for questions. That's what the Q&A box is for. If we don't have time, I just want to make sure everybody knows if we don't have time to get to your questions or they're at some very, very high level of technical complexity, we'll try to come back to you with an email response. We really appreciate your questions. And incidentally, it's really fun when our audience lets us know where you are from in the chat box. So with that, let's get into our program. Why are we here? Well, we're here because until a century ago, the American chestnut was one of the most important trees in the forests of the eastern United States, all the way from Mississippi to Maine and Ontario, and really foreshadowing all the destruction of trees that we're seeing today across the range. The chestnut was almost entirely wiped out of those forests in maybe 50 years or so. The American Chestnut Foundation, or TACF for short, was formed to save the tree and find a way to restore what was lost. And today, this effort to save the American chestnut is considered one of the most ambitious ecological restoration programs in the world. Yesterday, Mike Alcott presented an overview of efforts to bring the American chestnut back. Today, our presentations are a bit more technical. Right now, our presenter is going to be Steve Hoy, who's the chestnut orchard manager at Penn State. Steve has made all the difference in managing the orchards, harvests, plantings, volunteer activities, and helping us manage our grants. Hoy, as he likes to be called, has a forest technology degree from Penn State Mount Alto. That degree came in real handy. What is really special about Hoy is his quiet determination to work through whatever Mother Nature throws at the thousands of chestnuts on hundreds of acres that he oversees. He's applied that same ingenuity now to try to solve a problem that small-scale chestnut growers face: how to cost-effectively process harvested chestnuts. Small farms or large farms that are just gearing up for chestnut production can't afford all the capital expenditures for equipment. So Hoy studied how successful growers and cooperatives go about processing and adapted their methods to create a mobile unit that can be shared by farms and orchards during the time that matters most, at the critical moment of harvest. So today, welcome Hoy.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We'll be on our way. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jim. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to join us for our second presentation during the Chestnut Week at the Farm Show. As Jim mentioned, today's presentation is going to be a little more technical and a bit of a tangent from the primary mission of the American Chestnut Foundation. And instead of looking at restoring the American chestnut to the eastern forest, we're going to take a little bit of a detour and look at the post-harvest processing of chestnuts and the importance of this step to improve the storage quality of the nuts over winter, and through that increase your germination if you're holding seed for seedling production or for commercial production for consumption or selling nuts to customers. This presentation is possible through a specialty crop block grant from the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. This was awarded in 2018, so we're in our third and final year of the grant. And through this grant, we were able to, myself and the other primary investigators were able to travel to several different states, including Ohio and Michigan and Missouri, and observe different cooperative models there, and hear about other research on the commercial chestnut production side, as well as agroforestry practices, and make connections with other folks who are just truly in love with chestnut. I'd like to take a moment to thank all the members of the Pennsylvania, New Jersey chapter of the American Chestnut Foundation and all the American Chestnut Foundation members for your continued support, whether that's through volunteering or through your donations and memberships. And some of our volunteers like Mike Alcott yesterday and their time and dedication to presenting on this tree and what makes it so special to us. Many thanks to Dr. Greg Miller as well of Route 9 Cooperative and Empire Chestnut Company. Dr. Miller has been very generous throughout the course of this grant, and he's been really helpful with his knowledge and time. And on that note, if you're thinking about getting into more of the commercial chestnut production side, I'd highly recommend attending this evening session with Amy Miller, actually Greg's daughter, where she'll be discussing chestnut farming, a growth opportunity at 7 p.m. As well as Thursday evening, we'll have a commercial chestnut industry in Michigan presentation by Roger Blackwell. All these sessions are going to be available through the PA chapter Facebook page or the 2021 Farm Show Facebook page as well. So I'm going to skip most of the basic information about the American chestnut. Hopefully you were able to attend Mike Alcott's presentation yesterday. If not, please take the time to go look for that on the chapter Facebook page, like I just mentioned. It was a really excellent presentation and went into depth of the unique characteristics and qualities of the American chestnut and why it holds such a special place. For the purposes of this presentation, we're focusing on the nut production specifically. The American chestnut was historically significant as a crop in the greater area of Appalachia for both human consumption as well as for feed supplement for animals in the fall prior to the animals being harvested. Most folks are well aware that one of the best cultural references is Nat King Cole's Christmas song. The opening line, "Chestnuts roasting by the open fire, I will not sing," for the benefit of everyone here. That's why I work in forestry and not as a professional singer. But this song references the common theme for that time of roasted chestnuts and their prevalence in our society and community. Along with that, it was not uncommon to hear of the ease of harvesting vast quantities of nuts or having to kind of wade through the forest in the fall through the chestnuts and the chestnut burrs. And a lot of folks in the rural communities of Appalachia and Pennsylvania and further south would harvest these nuts, consolidate them in areas to be shipped into the cities and sold, or roasted on the streets and sold to individuals. You can still search the internet and find plenty of photos from this time frame of just piles of boxcars full of chestnuts waiting to be transported to the cities. Unfortunately, with the introduction of the chestnut blight identified in the early 1900s, we've lost that phase of the American chestnut. So fast forward to 2018 and the initiation of this grant, we wanted to investigate the potential, specifically in Pennsylvania, for American chestnuts to be a niche market crop, based partly on those stories of their preferred taste and being sold on the street corners, and claims that the American chestnuts were sweeter or better tasting than the nuts that were being imported that you'd find in a grocery store today. In Pennsylvania, the American chestnut covered the entire state to some degree. Pennsylvania is well positioned in the center of the native range of the American chestnut. And that's poses a unique situation where the United States is well suited to grow chestnuts, yet we lack a large chestnut industry. Globally, we account for less than 1% of the local product or the global production. That's based off of Ag Marketing Resource data from 2012. Without chestnut blight, Pennsylvania's relationship may have been very different with chestnut. In 1903, the Sober Farm, which was located in Irish Valley, PA, had over 75,000 trees. These were all of a cross between an American chestnut and a European, known as Paragon. And Mr. Sober was grafting these Paragon scion, these Paragon sticks, onto American rootstock. As we now know, both of those were susceptible or are susceptible to chestnut blight, and resulted in just the complete destruction of that farm and the loss of 300 acres of what could have been productive chestnuts. So what you'll find in the store today, on the far left, are the Europeans. These are most common in the stores. They're some of the largest chestnuts, and fairly sweet profile. The nuts in the center here are Chinese. They're the second most common for commercially produced chestnuts globally. And then on the far right, you'll see a comparison where we have the European in the upper left, the Chinese lower center, and then an American in the upper right. And you'll notice just the vast size discrepancy alone between these three. So if you're in the market for buying chestnuts, it's going to be a lot less effort to shell and peel these large Europeans or the medium-sized Chinese versus the small Americans. Both the European and the Chinese have had extensive breeding work done to improve their nut quality, flavor, size, storage, ease of peeling, things of that nature. And there's more breeding work being done to improve resistance to gall wasp, or exploring Phytophthora resistance, root rot, as well as other pressures on chestnut species. The American chestnut, by contrast, is way behind in that breeding area. So all the breeding work that has been done to this point is really focusing on imparting some level of resistance or tolerance to Cryphonectria parasitica, the fungus that causes chestnut blight, and not focused on improving nut flavor or nut size or storage qualities. So as part of this grant, we needed to do some investigating of what the local preference was for chestnuts, what the demand signal would be if we were to try to establish an American niche market. So we carried out some tasting events, 3 primary events to date. And what we found was an overwhelming majority of folks, if they were familiar with chestnut, they really favored the European, the yellow bar here on the left, followed closely by the Chinese. And then our Americans, which were harvested locally from a few small plots that we have available, were significantly behind. And then the hybrids on the far left were even further behind. So that was an indicator that if folks were familiar, they were really used to the Europeans. And that just drives home the fact that all that breeding work is paying off. They have the better flavor profile, they have the better nut quality, things of that nature. This was carried out over the course of a couple years. 2019, we actually experienced a crop failure, so we did not have the Americans to really distribute and get some more data points. And in 2020, along with everything else, we saw a late freeze that really reduced the harvest of nuts. We saw nut set reduced and flower buds being frozen and killed off because of that. And that ranged throughout the areas of commercial productions in Michigan, Ohio, and even the few farms in Pennsylvania. As a result of that, it was difficult to source the Americans, and we attempted to carry on with the tastings and to try to make it a blind tasting. We did not label things. We tried to color code them and be discreet about what chestnut was what type, but folks that were familiar were pretty easily able to determine what was the European and what was the Chinese, and the other two were rather unknown. So this is just an example of how the distributions in 2020 worked, where we were faced with the challenge of COVID-19 among everyone else, and trying to find safe ways to distribute nuts. So what we ended up doing was pre-bagging and assembling the samples, sending them off to individuals they could pick up at their own time, and fill out an online survey answering our questions. And that led to an unintended outcome of reports of quality issues with the nuts. And that was something we hadn't encountered before, but was not terribly surprising given that you're taking these living organisms, these nuts, and putting them in a sealed plastic bag and expecting folks to take them home. And sometimes they were left at room temperature, or they were forgotten for a few weeks. And when folks went to sample them, they discovered mold and reported that back to us. And that was important for us to know, because quality for all types of produce is key to getting return customers, having a positive experience from folks that are just trying it for the first time. So alongside mold, we also have the issue of the chestnut weevil, the greater and lesser chestnut weevil. Both are native to Pennsylvania because we are within the native range of the American chestnut. So commercial producers in the area are going to have to contend with these pests. And that is where we really started to take a look at the barriers to entry for these small scale growers or potential small scale growers that aren't able to put forward the capital expenditures for custom made or large scale equipment. And it's really not well suited to their needs. So the question was, what is needed? What is going to be most advantageous for these small scale growers or potential cooperatives in the state and in the region? And what do they need? And the key components are, we needed a unit that could heat treat the chestnuts. Heat treating to 120 degrees for 20 minutes kills the chestnut weevil. And in that same step, you can apply either a bleach type product or a peroxide to satisfy the kill requirements of mold or other pathogens that could be on the nuts after harvesting. So speaking with the growers that we visited, they were more on the large scale side of things, but the concepts were really the same. And what was developed out of these conversations and research was what we're calling the mobile chestnut processing trailer. This is on a 6x12 utility trailer base. So it's readily available as a platform to work off of. And the next two slides will be two videos, just first introducing the trailer and the components and how they function. And then the second video will describe areas that we've already evaluated as being able to be improved upon or refined, or maybe there's a better product out there that we can implement to improve the efficiency or quality of the end result. So I'll be starting the video now and come back at the end.
Hi, my name is Hoy, and today we will be reviewing our mobile chestnut processing unit. This unit was made possible through a specialty crop block grant through the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. Majority of the design features you will see are directly from Dr. Greg Miller's design and equipment out of Ohio. He is the owner and operator of Route 9 Chestnut Cooperative and Empire Chestnut Company. We have a heating system designed to treat chestnuts after they're harvested for the reduction of insect damage in chestnuts. This is a mandatory step if the chestnuts are going to be shipped to consumers for consumption. And what we've done is created a unique system that is mobile and can be driven to multiple sites for smaller farms to utilize. And the key components are this hybrid water heater, a large stock tank where we can dunk our chestnuts, and then our control panel with a temperature probe and a couple water pumps to help circulate the water to various places. So I'm going to start the system up, turn the main pump on, the injector pump, which will feed our water heater, and then our water heater itself. The water heater functions through the temperature probe, so that when we reach the desired temperature of 120 degrees, it will shut off automatically and prevent us from overheating our nuts. So at this point, we're going to take our chestnuts freshly harvested from the field and fill our basket. All right, so we'll pour our chestnuts in. And then we'll raise up the basket, wing our basket over the stock tank, and submerge it in the water. At this point, the chestnuts would sit in the 120-degree water for 20 minutes, and at the conclusion of 20 minutes, we would pull them out. Any of the nuts floating on top would be removed at this point because they're defective in some manner and wouldn't be fit for consumption. So we would skim those off the top, and all the nuts that sink to the bottom, we would pull them out, and we'll run them through our sorter after their treatment. So after our nuts have completed their hot water treatment, they're going to be raised out of the water and allowed to drain for a couple minutes. And during that time, this is our chestnut sorter. So another aspect of taking chestnuts to the consumer in the marketplace is standardization. And what this piece of equipment does is splits our chestnuts into various sizes. So we have 3 segments of a rain barrel or a 55-gallon drum drilled with holes. The first set is 7/8 of an inch, 1 inch in the middle, and 1 inch and 1/8 at the end. And this splits us up into size small chestnuts, medium, large, and anything that would make it all the way through is considered jumbo and will come out the very end of the sorter. So our chestnuts have finished draining, and we'll raise those up, Now we'll turn our sorter on. And be able to pull that. So we've run our nuts through our chestnut sorter, and the different size segments have allowed different sizes to fall out of the barrels and into our representative buckets. So we have small, medium, large, and our jumbos. And here is an individual sample of each. You can see our smalls are measuring less than an inch, our mediums around an inch, large are at or a little over, and our jumbos are the largest yet. So the sorter works by slowly rotating all the nuts, and they progress steadily from the entry point through meeting each barrel segment and their corresponding holes. The nuts fall out and are captured in the buckets, and once they all cycle through, we'll shut the machine off and bag the nuts up and mark them with their representative size. Hi, my name is Hoy, and today
This is our second video now. This will again go over some of the key components and some areas that we can improve upon the design from this prototype model that we have now.
So this is part 2 of our demonstration of our Chestnut mobile processing unit. And in this video, we'll be reviewing some of the key components and improvements on the basic design that we would recommend. First part we're going to review is our water heater. This is a hybrid water heater. It combines the efficiency of a tank water heater and a tankless water heater. So most water heaters have a 40 or 50 gallon capacity. This is only 20 gallon, but is able to heat 130 gallons in the first hour, which is ideal for our circumstances where we have 150 gallons and we need to raise that temperature up to 120 degrees. This unit is heated by propane. So we have a small grill-sized propane tank. And this is able to provide enough fuel for about 4 hours of runtime, depending on environmental conditions. Because the water heater is not heated with electrical elements, we're able to power this whole system off of one 20 amp circuit. This is our control board where all of our electrical components are wired. This board is powered off of one 20 amp circuit, and it operates our main circulator pump down here at the floor, our injector pump, which siphons off a small portion of that circulating water into our water heater and back into the main circulator loop, as well as our temperature probe and water heater. Our temperature probe is what determines when the injector pump is running and when it is shut off to maintain a steady temperature of 120 degrees. This is a very low cost unit, less than $100. We are going to experiment with a higher precision unit to see if you can justify the expense of a more precise piece of equipment versus a lower cost budget, more accessible piece of equipment. This is our temperature probe, and it reads the water as it's cycling from the tank through the pump. Sorry. One area we'd like to improve on our design is our sediment filter. So we have two levels of filtration. The larger pieces of debris are caught with this pool filter, and then the smaller pieces, fine sediment, are captured by this sediment filter. And what we found is this filter is too small for the amount of debris that gets incorporated into the system. So we'd like to replace this with a larger volume setup. Yep. This is our jib crane. This is a manually operated crane that can swivel 360 degrees and allows us to pick up heavier baskets of chestnuts and get them into our stock tank for heat treatment, as well as swinging over to our chestnut sorter to run them through after being heat treated. This unit is pretty essential to allowing us to do those higher volumes without a large increase in manual labor. So this saves us from having to manually lift buckets of chestnuts into and take them out of the tank, and allows us more mobility with having 360-degree access to the trailer. Okay, so this is our chestnut sorter, and we've tried to make it both a smaller scale to allow it to fit on our trailer, as well as using components that are readily available for most farmers or homesteaders. So we have our sorter barrel, which is made out of 3 55-gallon plastic drums that have been cut off on both ends. All the holes have been drilled by hand using 7/8, 1 inch, and 1 inch and an 1/8 bits. The unit is powered by a 1 horsepower farm or agricultural rated motor that's meant to be used in dusty, dirty conditions. So it should be good to have that exposed to the elements. And that drives a set of pulleys, and it's really critical to get your pulley size ratio correct in order to prevent the barrels from spinning too fast or too slow. We went with a 1.5 inch, an 8 inch, and another 1.5 inch pulley, and that drives a primary drive belt all the way around the barrel itself and back up. The barrel is supported by 4 casters on the bottom of the frame, so it's actually sitting on casters that are behind this board, and that allows the weight of a fully loaded haul of chestnuts to ride through the barrels without causing the barrels to sag. The one element we did have to outsource was the formation and welding of some metal bands. So the bands join the barrels together and also retain the barrels in the frame. Otherwise, things were built in-house and out of commonly available materials. So the casters are 4 inch, just a typical poly caster that can be used on, say, a tool chest or any sort of mobile cart that you'd wheel around. They're meant to withstand several 100-pound loads, so the amount of chestnuts flowing through the tube at any one time will not be an issue for them, and they have high-quality ball bearings to be low maintenance. the catchment for the nuts could be as simple as using 5-gallon buckets and bungee straps, or they can be improved to specified containers that can be mounted directly onto the frame. One area we'd also like to improve upon is this screening. So as you can see, there are some areas where nuts get stuck, and we'd like to build a solid curtain or partition to keep the nuts on the inside, prevent them from getting caught on so many surfaces, and speed up our processing ability by not having to stop periodically and move all the nuts off of the frame and scoop them into the buckets. The other area for improvement is our table. So as you can see, a number of the nuts have gotten stuck on the table and not fallen into their corresponding bucket. This is due to a couple of factors. One, the nuts tend to be still wet after coming out of our water treatment, and the surface of our table is fairly high friction, so it prevents the nuts from maintaining a free fall into the bucket. So we can improve upon that by increasing our slope and by treating the surface of the table with either a clear sealant or some other more slippery type surface to allow facilitates the nuts to freely flow into the buckets. So most of this equipment is based off of Dr. Greg Miller's design. I think the biggest improvement or modification we could have made was allowing those pieces to be mobile. A lot of the barriers for chestnut growers can be the limitations on the number of trees they have and it not justifying the purchase or expense of large-scale equipment. So we're hoping that by making these two elements, which are critical for anyone that's hoping to market chestnuts to a consumer, making them mobile so that this can be towed around to multiple sites, anywhere that has access to water and a grid-tied or generator-powered electrical system will be able to power this unit, get their chestnuts processed in a timely manner, and either sold directly to another entity or put into cold storage for later harvest. The total weight of this trailer without water and with the propane and all the components on it is 1,700 pounds. So you're well within any weight limits for a standard utility size trailer, and you're able to have everything secured either in the trailer itself or in the tow vehicle.
All right. So hopefully folks were able to see those. Jean Najar was able to post the links to those videos in our chat. If you'd like to copy those, or if you'd like to visit that site and watch those videos again, the links will stay there, as well as I have the link in the end of this presentation I'll post up so you can copy that down as well. So as mentioned in the second video, there are improvements that we've already identified we'd like to make. Some of the things that weren't mentioned, but you can see in this photo, are we had a variety of patterns that we used to put the holes into the barrels, and that was intentional to experiment with how many holes do you need, how much structural integrity do you lose with the number of holes that you put into a piece of plastic and things of that nature. So by far this middle barrel, it is the most supported of the three, but it also has the most holes. And that's really important to being efficient in getting the nuts to fall through and into their correct size bucket. As mentioned, we're going to adjust the pulley size to slow down our rotation a little more, and that'll improve our efficiency as well. And then lastly, just making the sides and underside of the of the sorter, less inviting for nuts to get caught and stuck and having to stop the machine and clean those out. For the water bath, we really do need a larger sediment filter or multiple sediment filters just to deal with all the debris that comes along with chestnuts that are being harvested out of a field, as well as a larger injection pump. We found some issues where getting the system primed can be problematic with that small pump. Lastly, this is meant to be towed around to different sites, and you're not always going to have a flat parking lot. So some sort of leveling system for the trailer itself so that we can have a flat and level workspace, not only for folks' safety, but to also ensure that you're getting proper flow through the system as it's intended. And then we're hoping to make most of these improvements this coming year and have a final prototype that's ready to be photographed and input into our documentation for the end of this grant. And that's really the end of my presentation. My email is here on the screen, sdh177@psu.edu if you have questions. And the link for those videos is at the bottom here. It's a bit long, but I'll leave that up and continue sharing this screen so folks can get that written down if they'd like to visit that site. There's plenty of additional information in that site as well for everything from harvest and storage to growing chestnuts to identifying chestnuts and everything in between. And again, I'd just like to remind you, we have more chestnut chats for this week of the farm show. The next one will be Amy Miller's tonight at 7 p.m. So be sure to tune in for that. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to Jim and we'll take questions if there are any.
Thank you, Hoy. Before we get to Q&A, I just want to say Hoy's approach is one example of the ingenuity of the people who are working to save the American chestnut. In many ways, it sums up what members, volunteers, and professionals are doing, staying positive and making a difference by working together. I know that may sound like we are all nuts about nuts, but the truth is the organization is about doing something bigger than ourselves, leaving a legacy for future generations, and trying to save trees in the forest that we all love and enjoy. If any of our listeners today would like to join us at the American Chestnut Foundation, simply go to www.acf.org and click on the membership tab. In fact, this year, our chapter is throwing in an incentive. Any new members who join the Pennsylvania, New Jersey chapter in January will automatically be entered in a drawing to win 6 pints of ice cream of your choice from the beloved Penn State Berkey Creamery. That creamery is located about 2 minutes from our headquarters office at Penn State and about 10 minutes from our orchard. And when people come to visit with us, they usually find their way over to the creamery. So now it's time to take some questions. I'm going to take a look. I've got a few for Hoy, and then I'm going to make sure I'll be checking the Q&A. Hoy, I guess part of the process you have is a dunking process. I'm curious whether you've thought about putting a drying process in as part of this.
Not in a mechanized fashion, as you can kind of see in the photo there, the red bags that are hanging up, those are the chestnuts drying. It's a bit of a unique situation when you're trying to combine research for breeding resistance and separating seed lots, as well as the commercial production side, where typically those would all be lumped into the one large lot and all run through together. But this method worked pretty well for just using ambient airflow to help dry the nuts down. And you're not really looking to cure them, you're just looking to get off some of that residual moisture from being in the water.
Okay. Does a process like you were describing, Greg Miller's process, Greg's a chestnut grower and runs a cooperative in just across the border in Ohio. Do they have a drying process in a larger facility?
No, surprisingly, they follow a much larger scale, but a similar process of dunking the nuts. And then what they'll do is size them and then leave those large bulk bins of nuts to just air dry. They'll stack them up or spread them out in their covered facility and just allow them to kind of drip dry over the next day before they go on to the next processing step.
Okay. Mike Alcott, who spoke yesterday, asked the question, after the heat treatment and sorting, is a treatment necessary to prevent mold?
There could be an additional step, and we started to mess around with that this fall of incorporating like a sterilization or a sanitation treatment into the hot water bath. So incorporating a bleach or a peroxide solution and allowing the nuts to sit in that to kill off any of the mold spores that may be on the nuts, and then allowing them to air dry should adequately cure that issue. And then we periodically check the nuts while they're in storage and kind of spot treat as needed. For the commercial side, we did not see any real mold issues in storage until the past 2 weeks, which we're getting about the point of planting. So ideally, those nuts would have been sold to a consumer and gone from the supply chain at that point.
I see. Okay. Arthur asked, did it take more than one time through the sorter to accomplish the task? Looks like there could be a learning curve for feeding the nuts in.
Definitely. Yeah. So I would definitely say this is a work in progress. We're still got our big ideas of how we'd like things to run. And I think the combination of standardizing the pattern in the barrels for the holes, slowing down the rotation of the sorter tube itself, would eliminate the need for a second run. But yes, currently as the equipment is, you do need to run it through a second time just to verify that you're getting the appropriate size in the corresponding bucket.
Okay. Hoy, do you have any sense of capacity of, how much production could go through this is it per day, per hour, whatever measures would be used? Do you have any sense of capacity?
I have a guess, and it's based on, the limits of that crane can support about 500 pounds. I hope the basket could support 500 pounds if we could fit that volume into it.
Yes.
But I would say at a minimum, you're looking at probably 1,500 to 2,000 pounds in a day if it was set up at one centralized location, based off of like a 30-minute total cycle time, and then some buffer built in for reheating of the water to that 120 degrees, switching out propane tanks, things like that.
Okay. David asks, are chemicals needed to kill the weevil, or would the heat do that?
So that's an interesting point. And chemicals are really not effective at this stage at controlling weevil. So the weevil enters immature nuts while they're still in the burr. The burrs are closed tight. So if you wanted to treat the orchard, you could use an insecticide, pesticide, with the appropriate timing of late August, early September. And that would be where a chemical would come into play. At this point, it's really the heat that's necessary to kill off the eggs before you don't want the eggs to hatch into the larva. The larvae are the destructive part that they feed on the inside, the kernel of the nut, and you can't see any evidence of that until they chew through the shell of the nut and emerge before going into the soil to overwinter.
Okay. I just wanted to circle back actually to something you were talking about earlier. I think you called it the silva farm or the silver farm. Where
silver
where
farm.
exactly was 75,000 trees located in Pennsylvania? Where was that?
That was in Irish Valley. Um, and I honestly forget what county that is in. I believe it was more southeastern PA, but I'd have to confirm that.
Okay.
And I don't think that was all as an orchard setting. That was a combination of orchards and seedling, grafted material for production. And Sarah Fitzsimmons for the win with Schuylkill County outside of Shamokin, or maybe Carbon County.
Yes. And then do you have any sense, Hoy, of where other chestnut farms are in Pennsylvania or New Jersey for that matter? Are they spread out, or is there any concentration even with the few that we have?
It really does seem to be scattered. I know of one individual. He's in, I believe it's Bucks County, and then there's another. I'm not sure if they're in. I think they're in Dauphin County, but they're pretty small scale, or they really don't want to have a lot of attention brought on their operation. So I'll respect that, not name drop those individuals, but it seems to be they're few and far between, but scattered in more the southeastern quarter of the state.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Hoy. I can see in the chat, people are really laying out a couple of real high praise for you and for the presentation today. I want to thank everybody for being here. We've reached the end of today's session. And Hoy, thanks for adopting a new technology, trying something, make it easier for chestnut farmers to process the crops for market. Everybody, this is part of a series. So join us each weekday this week at noon and at 7 o'clock tonight and on Thursday for a new discussion about all things chestnut. Tonight, as Hoy mentioned, at 7, I will be interviewing Amy Miller, who is Greg Miller's daughter, who's a chestnut farmer, a cooperative operator, and an expert on chestnut pests. Wednesday at noon, we'll hear from Dr. William Powell, who has developed a blight-tolerant chestnut, which shows great promise that really could change everything. On Thursday at noon, our own Sarah Fitzsimmons will discuss silvicultural aspects and restoration of American chestnut. And then at 7, I'll be interviewing Chestnut Growers of America's president, Roger Blackwell, who has a chestnut farm in Michigan and has a lot of insights on growing. And on Friday, our wrap up will be Lake Grabowski discussing finding American chestnuts in the wild. On behalf of the Pennsylvania, New Jersey chapter of the American Chestnut Foundation, we really appreciate all of your interest, support, and questions. More information is available at www.pa.njtacf.org. And thank you. And we hope you will consider joining us to save and restore the American chestnut. Thank you all.